Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Damon, I haven't heard you say those words in person in so long.
We haven't inhabited the same meat space in years. It's amazing. And joining us this week, sitting in for Ryan McCaffrey on the Xbox side of things, Miranda Sanchez, also from Podcast Unlocked and IGN's executive editor of the Guides team. Thank you for joining us today, Miranda.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to step in for Ryan while he takes a little bit of a sick day. But
sure.
I'm glad to be here because this new studio is really nice. Our assets are really nice, and it's good to
this
share a table with y'all.
This is our new studio here in San Francisco, and the first time that all three panelists of the show have been together in literal years, so it's very exciting. And this is, of course, usually a very serious show. Our panelists from both sides of the aisle, PlayStation and Xbox, often get into very heated arguments. So we're going to keep things light and happy today, talking about gaming franchises that are dormant that we would love to see resurrected on both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. There are some of these that have already been announced, things like Perfect Dark, Fable, even another Alan Wake is coming. Technically, I think hopefully someday we're going to get this Perfect Dark game. But I'd love to hear from both of you, what are some other long missing gaming franchises that are favorites that you'd love to see return on the new gen consoles. Miranda, let's start with you. What's your first pick?
Yeah, so the first pick I'm going to go with is not one that folks who listen on Unlock will probably have heard me scream about, but that one is coming. My first pick is actually Mech Assault. So Mech Assault, we got two iterations of. The first one, which was on the original Xbox. The second, which was Lone Wolf in 2004. Both were received really well. Lone Wolf actually got an 8.9 from IGN. So these are very loved games, and I would like to see those come back just because I feel like we're missing a little bit of a mech void. Titanfall. But it's mostly just because I think it's good to have a little bit more of a different sort of military sim with mechs, and I think though I would love Respawn to come back with Titanfall, I don't want them to be my only option for cool mech battles that are 1v1 or just story based. And I know there are more mech games on the market now, and there's a variety of things you can try out, but I would love to see this franchise in particular come back. There was just something that they did about the world building and how everything felt so small beneath you that was just very empowering, so I would want that back.
So Mech Assault, a multiplayer-focused mech combat game that really took early advantage of Xbox Live and all those online components, right?
Yeah, so that was also an element of it as well. So if you just want to run around by yourself and do cool things, you could, but also getting online and having that element as well is really fun. And I think it is different, of course, from Titanfall, where you're still the pilot, right? You still run around with your guns and you can go call in your mech, and that's a bonus, but having it formatted just for the mechs would be really neat. And I think the studio that did do Mech Assault previously, that was Day One Studios, who was acquired by Wargaming in 2013. So now they are one family, and now if you know Wargaming, they are just doing World of Tanks.
Exactly. So World of Mechs.
World of Mechs.
Come on, all you brand managers out there, I shouldn't have to do your jobs.
It's right there.
World of Mechs.
Yes.
Let's get on that one. Okay, Jonathon, hit us with your first pick.
Yeah, my first pick is nothing to do with mechs, unfortunately. And it's one that I think, sadly, there's at least been put the kibosh on it happening anytime soon. But I want it to happen still. Sly Cooper.
Sly Cooper, the Thievis Raccoonus.
Indeed. He's been through time. He's been through many famous cities. But yeah, of the PS2 era, we still have Ratchet and Clank going. Jak and Daxter is another one that we hear a lot of want for, and I think that's another one. But for me personally, Sly was the series I grew up with. And for me, I think it's a really interesting sort of... In the 3D platformer space, it holds an interesting space because it is so much, stealth-based. But it's got those collectathon natures to it that a lot of 3D platformers excel at. It's got a lot of really great charm and humor and character design. The art style to it, I think, kind of stands the test of time in a really great way. So it's easy to adapt. That said, Sucker Punch has come out and said they're not working on one.
Well, so they also have a new game.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
Yes, they do, and they're probably working on a sequel for that, given how successful it was. But at the end of the day, Sly 4 Thieves in Time was developed by Sanzaru Games, I believe. And so it's not, above or below PlayStation to have that franchise go out to another studio. It seems like Sucker Punch was okay with letting the reins go for that one. So I think it is a potential one that another studio could take on. They've certainly worked with other devs. I think most recently, Sumo Digital has done a great job with the Sackboy franchise. So I think Sumo is kind of shows an example of Sony working with a third party on a franchise that they owned, but having someone else take it on. And I think Sly deserves that treatment. I think it's a really clever series, and I'd love to see it come back.
Sly was last seen on PS3 and Vita?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
So they sat out PS4 entirely?
Yes, yeah, unfortunately.
I would like to see that back. There aren't very many linear stealth-based games these days, so it could definitely fill that niche. Yeah. Okay, Miranda, what's your second pick?
My second pick. Okay, this is the one I talk about all the time. Every prediction, every single year, and I will never give it up. It's Fusion Frenzy. And the reason I always come back to this is because one thing that I think a lot of folks have talked about with Xbox is we want to see a more diverse portfolio for their first-party games. And what better than a party game? And specifically with Fusion Frenzy, I think it was such a unique mix because it kind of blended in the traditional party game where you're running around a board and you have a lot of mini games, but also this really cool world building where it was a little dark and gritty and like they're competing, and just the whole aesthetic of it was really neat. And it was something that I really cherished, and it was one of the ways that I got a lot of my friends when I was younger into getting to play games. And so I'm so glad that's still backwards compatible. It's still supported, like I can still play it, but a new one would be nice.
Yeah, a multiplayer party game is something both platforms are lacking these days, I think.
Yeah, it's basically just Nintendo at this point that is like really going hard with Mario Party. And I think we do have a lot of really cool third-party things, but ultimately, I just want something where I can sit down with my friends on a couch and play together. Or if I have to do it online, that's fine as well, but not something that's necessarily competitive with a bunch of people on the internet, right? And I think I look at a lot of different things like Fall Guys, like that has that cool mini game element, and there's like cool party games there, but at the end of the day, it's not something I can just play with the people next to me and like on my Xbox or wherever it may be.
So the original Fusion Frenzy was developed by Blitz, I think.
Blitz Game Studios,
which is a British development studio. And then the second one was actually Hudson Soft in Japan, which has now been absorbed by Konami.
Yeah.
I don't think you would want Konami to make Fusion Frenzy 3.
No.
Who would you pick to do that?
I don't know who I'd want.
Nintendo.
Nintendo, sure, why not? Honestly, they got a good thing going. Actually, I'd be interested in Double Fine. Because Double Fine, if you just even look at what they did with Psychonauts 2, like there's so many fun, just like almost mini game like challenges in that, and they're so imaginative, and they do such fantastic animations and quirky characters, and I think that they would be a really good fit for this if they wanted maybe like, I don't think this would necessarily be a tiny project, but maybe a smaller project than a full narrative adventure game. So that's something I'd be more interested in. And it's funny too, because Blitz was an odd pick for this when I look back at it, because they did things like The Mummy Returns, Chicken Run, Barbie Horse Adventures, Wild Horse Rescue.
So a lot of licensed stuff.
Yes, they were very much in license, and that's ultimately also kind of was part of their downfall, is since they were really reliant on that, and they didn't have licensed games toward the end of the cycle. You know, those sort of phased out, which is actually kind of a shame because I think licensed games are really fun. That's kind of where they went down. So if we had someone pick up the mantle, I'd ask for Double Fine.
Okay, a new Fusion Frenzy from Double Fine. We'll greenlight that one.
I like that.
Jonathan, next pick.
Yeah, I guess just to keep it in the party realm, or like having people playing together on the same couch, I would like PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale 2 of some kind.
Okay.
There's a lot there to work with in the title. And it's actually funny, this week on Beyond we talked about EVO and the fighting game scene and kind of everything going on there. Obviously, PlayStation now has a stake in EVO and in the fighting game scene in general, so why not have your own flagship game to go alongside that? I think there were some creative ideas in PlayStation All-Stars. Not all of them succeeded, but I think there was a really good basis there. And I think more so now than ever, especially even during the PS3 era, PlayStation has really solidified sort of its like icons at the moment. The PS3 era, there was a lot of third-party stuff. They were kind of like, okay, I guess the Big Daddy being in there is fine, even though that first launched on Xbox, BioShock, and it's a little weird. But, whatever, I'll go with it. They really have placed an emphasis on, like, Kratos and Astro and Sackboy and Spider-Man and Aloy and all these people being the, like, PlayStation ensemble. And having all of them in a fun, whether it's a platform fighter, whether it's a new spin on fighters to some degree, I think would be really, really fun for the PlayStation audience to engage in. Because whenever you see those crossover photos or art or anything, everyone's like, I want to play that game. I want to see all of them interact. I want something fun there. And a multiplayer fighting game or kart game are kind of the two options when you think of those. So
PlayStation All-Stars was supposed to be Sony's answer to Smash Brothers.
Smash,
right? And if I remember right, 2012, I think like people generally liked the mechanics, but it just was a little bit. It didn't have as much content as people were expecting.
And I just don't think it was the best time for it as well. But yeah, it was a neat idea that I just don't think was fully executed on.
It's also, even though it has Battle Royale in the title, preceded the Battle Royale movement by many years. So maybe they should just make it a Battle Royale game now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, hey, 100 astrobots jump into an island and they all fight to survive. I'd play that game too.
Yeah, that sounds like pretty fun. Okay, Miranda, your third and final pick.
Yes. This one is very near and dear to my heart. I had a time where I was on vacation in Colorado with my family. We rented a little cabin because my family's kind of big, so we just didn't stay at hotels. And that cabin had an Xbox.
Oh, cool.
And that Xbox had Jet Set Radio.
Cool.
And that's what I want to come back. I know we are getting sort of like an indie dev doing the Jet Set thing as well, but I would love to see a renewed focus for that. Just, I don't care what platform it's on, honestly. I just want a new Jet Set Radio. I think it's such a shame that Sunset Overdrive was like kind of a one and done, because the movement mechanics in that and the style of it were so cool. And again, kind of going back to Xbox diversifying its full portfolio, I think having something that is just purely fun and cool, and you can get some of that with like Psychonauts and other things as well, but that I think is just like bright colors and joy, even if there's like sort of a darker background behind it. I think that speed and movement and just delight is something that I'd like to see back on Xbox, of course with great music too.
So Jet Set was Sega.
Yes.
Would you just trust Sega to make another one?
Sure. Yeah. They know how to go fast, generally.
That's true.
You know.
That's true. It's a
part of their
perfect fit.
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan, your final pick today.
My third one, there's a lot of other first-party stuff that I could talk about, but I guess to do a third-party one sort of to match as well, a series that's also near and dear to my heart from my childhood, SSX.
Yeah.
You know, despite apparently the alleged cancellation of, you know, the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake remaster that we heard about, skating games are back in a big way. That remake of 1 and 2 were really well received. We have Skate coming back. We have a few other indie games in the mix as well. And I loved snowboarding games as a kid as well. And there's not, you know, we've seen a few, I think, on the indie side, but SSX to me, especially Tricky, the second one in the series, was like one of my most played games of that era. And I think it really nailed the balance between like ridiculous stunts and doing incredible tricks that you would never be able to actually pull off, but having a really tight like overall mechanic system to it, having really smart level design, having really great layouts and things that I think the team back then handled really well. And we've seen some SSX stuff since then. There was a revival in the, I want to say, Xbox One, PS4 early era, or it might have been right before that. And it was good, but I miss sort of the craziness, the like really all out there joy of snowboarding that was there with the older SSX games.
Yeah, it is surprising that there's no real snowboarding game today. SSX, the last SSX I think was EA Canada, which is now EA Vancouver, and I think they're trapped in a loop of FIFA, NHL, FIFA, NHL, FIFA, NHL.
No, it's, you know, obviously EA knows the sports titles that are making the most money for them, and they're sticking with them. But that EA Sports big label that SSX really like brought out to me and a few others, I would love to see a comeback of that in some way.
Okay, those are some franchises we'd love to see return on the current gen consoles. I wonder, on the flip side, if there are any long-running franchises that are here and maybe we'd be happy for them to take a little break for a little while. Take a little time out.
So maybe like a long nap.
A long nap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miranda, is there something that comes to mind?
Yes. Which is, I feel bad for because I mean, I think we've seen from a lot of franchises that have long development periods that they just do better for. Every time you look at a Final Fantasy game, I know when I was growing up, I was really confused and I thought they're all like one series. I was like, wow, I've played so many to play this at all. And that's not the case. And I think them giving a lot of breathing room between their iterations lets them do things that are pretty cool and innovative, or at least within their storytelling, and like refine their combat systems and do something new, make beautiful food in their games that I want to have, and we go on a road trip with a bunch of boys, and then next one is completely different, you know?
Yes.
And I think that's really a strength of the series, but then we see these long-running games that just, they need a little bit of a break. For me, my first pick is Call of Duty, which I don't think is an unfair pick. Obviously, they had the rotation of 3 studios, and there was like a stumble with that, and we've had some issues with Vanguard, and just all the Call of Duties of late. I think anytime you look at them, the community is always just like, this is the same game, or this is my favorite game, but I hate these elements, or no, don't go back to this one next. And I think that as a whole just needs a big refresh and just what that looks like. And I understand the financial reasons that they want and the business reasons for having these yearly releases. But at the same time, it's so, I think, draining for the studios, and you can see how some of there's like a bit of creative exhaustion in some of like their map designs for multiplayer or the stories that they want to tell. And I think a game like Call of Duty could just take maybe a year off. Like, I don't know, rely on Warzone for a minute, you know?
Sure, and that might be happening. There's been some rumors that this year Modern Warfare 2 could be there could be like a break in between that one and the next one. So that little timeout, that little break could be coming for Call of Duty. We'll see. Jonathan, is there anything that springs to mind for you?
You know, it's kind of, I think Call of Duty is the most obvious one too, of just for like give them all a chance to breathe and really think about what the future is. I would have said, but we're kind of on a break for it. You know, we've been for a little bit in terms of major releases, but Assassin's Creed, you know, it did come back. It had that year break, and then it came back in this new form with Origins and Odyssey and now Valhalla. And I would have said after Valhalla, like, take a break and a breather, but they're on, you know, that was 2020. They've been doing post-launch content. It does feel like they're taking a minute to figure out what the future is. We've heard reports of what Infinity may be, that they may be sort of going toward a platform-based Assassin's Creed, and, you know, we'll see what that's like. But I think that was a franchise that I really, really loved and has become many different things at this point. And I just wonder to them, like, what, at the end of the day, do they consider the essential Assassin's Creed experience to be, and how are they going to move forward with that? But that one's at a weird juxtaposition. The good thing on the PlayStation side is, one, they usually let their studios take time or also move on from series. We were just talking about, you know, Sucker Punch isn't making Sly Cooper anymore.
That's really impressive, honestly, because I actually worry about that on the Microsoft side. So you see 343, that's the Halo studio. You see the Coalition, that's the Gears studio. And they've done, you know, hit and miss things across all of them. Playground, I feel like, is the one that has like the coolest, because they're doing, you know, Forza, which just keeps getting better.
But then they're also doing
Fable. They're doing Fable, which is really cool. So when I look at the Microsoft studios, I'm like, well, I hope you guys get some room to play a little bit different. And at least with the Coalition, we did see them do Gears Tactics, which is a really cool shakeup on the Gears franchise. But for 343, and obviously they're having, you know, some time, they had some challenges with getting Infinite going, but they obviously benefited from having more time to figure out what that game is.
Okay. Last episode, we were talking about the UI and the dashboards of both consoles. I think we generally agreed that both UIs are fine, but there's room for improvement there. And we asked you in our poll last week, which UI do you prefer, the audience? And perhaps not surprisingly, the winner was PS5 with 46% of the vote. But Xbox Series X was not too far behind with 35%. Steam Deck, though, way down at the bottom. But I have a feeling that's just because very, very few of you own a Steam Deck. A poll for you to vote on for next week. Which franchise would you like to see resurrected on next-gen/current-gen consoles? Fusion Frenzy, Sly Cooper, Mech Assault, Twisted Metal, SSX. Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Jonathan and Miranda. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our San Francisco studio to make this episode possible. We'll be back next Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.